Welcome to this very special episode of Your Voice America. The Middle East is on fire right now. It's a very dangerous place. And President Trump is coming into office, and he's coming in as a peacemaker. I have with me today Dan Diker and Khaled Toameh. They are with the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Dan is the president, and Khaled is the director of Arab Affairs. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bill. It's good to be with you.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Thank you.
I met Dan on a space. We do these spaces on X, and I was so impressed with his answers and his intellect. It's like, I've got to get this guy on the show. He really knows what's going on. Why don't you explain for the audience exactly what the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs does?
Well, thank you, Bill. On behalf of Khaled, my dear colleague and friend of several decades, and myself and the rest of the team at Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, it's wonderful to be with you. This is definitely a momentous time. It's a very dangerous time. Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, based in Israel's capital, Jerusalem, and a great friend and ally of many policy centers in the United States, is basically what we call a do tank. It is a center for diplomacy, policy, and communications, in which Jews and Arabs work together on a very pro-America agenda to re-energize the long-standing alliance between the United States and the Middle East, with Israel as an anchor or a bridge between the Arab Middle East and the West.
Amazing, because most Americans think that Arabs and Israelites cannot work together. Jews cannot work together, but they actually do, don't they, Khaled?
Absolutely. I mean, I've also discovered that many people around the world, including in America, don't even know that there are 2 million Arabs living inside Israel as Israeli citizens. And when I say Arabs, I'm also including the Jews and the Circassians and the Bedouin and Arab Christians. And these, I mean, I belong to that community, by the way. We are living inside Israel as Israeli citizens. Not only do we work together, but we study together. We do so many things together. Arabs serve in the army. They serve in the police force. They are in government. Some of them hold very high positions, like chairman of banks, vice presidents of universities, and so on and so on. So these are things that people don't know. I've talked so far about the Arabs living inside Israel, the 20% of the population, but we haven't even talked about cooperation between Israel and some Palestinians in the West Bank. These are things that people don't know, that in the West Bank, there's also cooperation between Israeli Jews and Palestinians living there. We have tens of thousands of Palestinians who work in Israeli settlements in the West Bank. We have Israeli Jewish settlers who worked with Palestinians through business, through all kinds of different things. You have supermarkets where you have Jews and Palestinians working together. So there are many good things happening there on the ground, but you don't really hear about them.
Yeah, that is really remarkable. Well, it seems like the conflict we have, and I'm not an expert, you guys are the experts, but it seems like the conflict we have is primarily, Iran driving all these things. And then you've got Hezbollah and you've got Hamas. And these are the groups that are having the problems right now. And now we have this huge conflict in Gaza, and they're trying to get Hamas out of Gaza, and they continually have the rocket attacks. Dr. Dan, how are we going to get to an endpoint on this? I mean, it's really hard to take these guys out. I mean, you take out one leader and they can relatively easily replace them. I mean, these leaders are not Patton, okay? They're not battlefield generals. There's basically the biggest thug on the block. How do we take these guys out?
Well, Bill, as you pointed out, you put your finger on the heart of the problem, and that is the Iranian regime that began in 1979. Do you remember the first act of terror that they executed back in 1979? I think you remember
the hostage crisis, right?
That's right. They kidnapped 66 American citizens and held 53. American citizens for 444 days, and they released them on January 20th, 1981, when Ronald Reagan stepped into office. And we have a potentially similar situation in which the Iranian regime, to put it mildly and bluntly, is terrified of President Trump's victory, because they know that President Trump means business, and President Trump speaks Middle East, and President Trump was able to coalesce the leader of the Arab world, which is Saudi Arabia, and several other Arab countries like Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates. He even got Sudan, which is an arch enemy of the West and Israel, and they got Morocco to step up to the plate and cooperate in the most far-reaching coalition of peace in the history of the modern Middle East. And President Trump did that back in 2020. There's nothing that frightens the Iranian regime more than seeing President Trump able to coalesce and realign an Arab-U.S. relationship together with America's Israeli ally. So this is why we're right now at an inflection point in which things are very shaky. You pointed out Gaza, the Hamas, which is an Iranian Sunni, they are a proxy. The Hezbollah are a proxy. The Syrians are a proxy, a state proxy. That means that Iran basically runs the chessboard of terror across the Middle East. But at this particular moment, with President Trump having won in a landslide election, that sends a very disturbing message to America's arch enemy, the Iranian regime, and Israel's arch enemy, the Iranian regime, so that there's an opportunity now to destroy our common enemy and embrace common allies.
Yeah, I agree. And here's the thing. The reason why terrorist groups and this sort of things persist in my mind is not just, the personnel, the assets, the weapons. It's the idea. Okay, it's the idea you have to defeat. If you can defeat the idea, then all the rest will fall away. And I think that one of the ideas that Trump brings is that these guys look into the future and they say, wait a minute, if Trump's going to be in office for 4 years, this is not going to go well for us for 4 years. If we keep doing this, maybe it's in our own best self-interest to back away from this belligerent stance and maybe to actually seek peace with Israel and to seek peace in the Middle East, because I don't believe Hamas and these groups really have the best interests of the Palestinians at heart. I think they're using them as human shields. I think the Palestinian people really want peace, don't they, Khaled?
Absolutely. Hamas does not really care about the Palestinians. Right. Hamas came to power in 2007 through a bloody coup that they staged against the Palestinian Authority. And they took control over Gaza, where 2 million Palestinians live. And since then, instead of building hospitals and schools, they built tunnels. Instead of improving the living conditions of their people, they were manufacturing and smuggling weapons into Gaza. They were actually preparing for war. We must not forget, Bill, that this organization, Hamas, is part of a jihadist movement. It is a movement that is bent on destroying Israel. They come with a very radical ideology that does not believe in Israel's right to exist. They want to replace Israel with an Islamist state, and they will continue their jihad. If anyone thinks that, if you destroy Hamas's military capabilities or that they will disappear and that their ideology will go, I'm sorry to tell you, they're there. And they're not going to go very easily. It will take decades to get rid of Hamas's or the jihadist ideology, and that requires a process of de-radicalization.
Right.
You need the only way to get rid of this dangerous ideology is through education, and we haven't even started yet. So even if Hamas is defeated today, we need to start working on getting rid or eliminating this dangerous ideology that is backed by Iran. At the end of the day, all roads lead to Iran. Hamas is only one of several proxies that the Iranian regime is using to advance its goal of eliminating the quote-unquote Zionist entity.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me ask you this, Dr. Dan. What do you think the effect of our very weak, very poor withdrawal from Afghanistan was? I mean, that was a disaster for us. That was a tour de force of weakness. Do you think that emboldened Iran and emboldened the enemies of Israel?
Bill, the American retreat, or I would say the American collapse
Yeah,
in Afghanistan, the scenes of the American planes taking off with leaving behind billions of dollars in American military equipment, having people running after the plane, trying to grab onto the wing in desperation, people falling off the plane. It basically showed, from a perception standpoint, America as a paper tiger,
yeah,
America as, and it energized and encouraged jihad, holy war around the Middle East, because it reminded them it reminded them of America in Vietnam. It reminded them of Israel running out of southern Lebanon in the year 2000. These have been isolated. These have been incidents that if you show weakness, if you're the weak horse in the Middle East, the strong horse will replace you. And that's an idea that's 700 years old in Arab Muslim history, that history in the Arab Muslim tradition is a reflection of cycles of violence in which strong horses replace weak horses. So you've got to be the strong horse in order to win in the Middle East, because you said it 2 minutes ago, Bill. The word peace means something totally different in the Middle East than it does in the West. In the Middle East, there's no such thing as let bygones be bygones.
right.
There is submission to Allah, and that is what peace means. That is what Islam means. It means submission to Allah. In the West, shalom or peace means let's cut it down the middle. Let's compromise. Let's have a ceasefire. Let's all be friends. Let's have bygones be bygones. And that has been the problem, and especially this outgoing administration and previous administrations, not the Trump administration, but previous administrations have gotten it wrong in the Middle East, because they think that the Middle East they think like us, and they dream like us, and they analyze like us. They do not. There are winners and there are losers. And right now, Israel is considered a strong horse, and the United States today, since November the 5th, is at the moment considered a strong horse.
Yeah, remarkable. You know, I think that the Afghanistan retreat collapse also had a strong effect on the Russian-Ukrainian situation, because we know that Putin really, as his bucket list, I think he wanted to reunite the USSR. That was his whole idea. And I think his generals were lying to him and saying, listen, they hate their leaders there in Ukraine. If you just march in there, you're going to be a conquering hero. They're going to have open arms. And he was actually surprised. And when they invaded, they were fighting back as hard as they did. And then, of course, we cut off the oil pipelines. We stopped drilling. And that drove the price of oil up to $150 a barrel. And that enriched Putin and gave him the opportunity and the money to invade. Do you think that there was an extended effect where this weakness by the Biden administration has just sort of had a butterfly effect all over the world and really caused all of these wars to pop up? Khaled, what do you think?
Well, I can certainly say that this applies to Iran and the jihadist groups in the Middle East, who saw the retreat from, or the U.S. retreat from Afghanistan, as a capitulation, as surrender to terrorism, and as appeasement. And I remember they were issuing all these statements after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, in which they were saying, and when I say they, I mean Iran and its terror proxies, that, wow, look, this is great. Look at these Americans running away in the face of quote unquote resistance. And they were saying this is the only language the Americans understand, and we need to continue the fight. So this retreat did send a very bad message to the Middle East, that America is weak, that America runs away in the face of terrorism. And look where we are now. Look at the Middle East. The policy of appeasement also towards the Iranian regime has brought us to this situation. So it's no wonder that you have Putin also looking at this and saying, wow, these Americans, they're very weak, and maybe I have an opportunity over here.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what happened. I think that's what happened. And then once Putin went in, and it didn't turn out the way he thought, his generals were lying to him about being accepted with open arms. He couldn't just go back with his tail between his legs, and he didn't want that to be his legacy. And so it's just it's become the forever war. It's just gone on and on. Dr. Dan, I really am thinking that Trump could have an incredible opportunity here. If he can come into office and we can get the hostages returned, we can bring peace to the Middle East, and we can get an end to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. I mean, this is just going to give rocket fuel to his entire administration, just like when Reagan came in and they brought the hostages home on day one. What do you think?
Well, I think there is a symmetry that you're very rightly pointing out here. The situation today is far more complicated than it was in 1979 when the Iranian Revolution took so many American captives. The situation today, Bill, vis-a-vis the United States, is one in which 100 American citizens were murdered, maimed, and then ultimately kidnapped by Hamas under the aegis of Iran, October 7, 2023. This discourse has been missing in the United States media. That what Hamas did on October 7th, under Iranian sanction, with Iranian weapons and Iranian money and Qatari money, was very much a casus belli, an act of war against the United States, not just Israel. And today you have 8 American citizens being held in the terror tunnels far underneath the ground by Hamas with Iranian sanction. So you point out very correctly that there is a possibility of some sort of interim grand bargain whereby Iran pressures the Hamas together with perhaps behind the scenes the Qataris, who we know play a double game. They're loyal to the Hamas. They also house America's major military installation in Doha, and it's a very strange bedfellow. But at the same time, there is leverage there because Trump can very well tell the Qataris that if you don't, together with the Iranians, you don't get those hostages back, America's going to pull its military installation out and send it to Saudi or put it in the UAE, and that's the end of Qatar. So there is a possibility here of a grand bargain that would result in all 101 hostages, those who are not alive, and please God, those that are alive, we don't know how many are alive, but they would be freed up, and then there would be some sort of an interregnum. There is no such thing as a ceasefire in the Arab world. There's only something called a hudna, which is a temporary cessation of hostilities. Khaled could tell us really about that within the cultural context of the Middle East. And then in Hezbollah, they would be forced to move north of the Litani River, allowing 70,000 Israeli citizens to move back to their homes in northern Israel. That could be an interim grand bargain, but it does not mean long-term peace.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, we always think that America is a superpower because we've got the biggest Navy, we got the biggest army, we got the best weapons. The true American superpower is our economy, our economic power in the world. That's what drives everything. And I really believe that with Trump at the helm, we can start to flex again on that economy, where we can become a net exporter of energy again, where we can become the primary source of gas, natural gas for Europe, so they're no longer dependent upon Russia, that we're no longer going to the Saudis and the Venezuelans with our hands out, and using up our strategic oil reserves just to bring the price of gas down for political reasons. And I think that if people sense that, and they sense that their economic futures lie with alliances and working with the United States of America, that is better leverage than bullets and bombs, in my opinion. What do you think, Khaled?
Well, I think that America in the past 4 years has lost much of its credibility
Yes.
and standing among many people around the world, especially in the Middle East. America, over the past 4 years under the Biden administration, was seen as weak, as very fragile, as turning its back on its allies. People, even Arabs, by the way, in the Middle East, they were looking at the crisis between the Biden administration and the Netanyahu government. And this created the impression that America is about to throw Israel under the bus. And this actually emboldened Iran and its terror proxies. America did not really use, its power to impose severe sanctions on the Iranian regime, and that's a missed opportunity. Iran did not really use, its financial aid to demand from the Palestinian Authority, for example, reform, democracy, and an end to glorification of terrorism and funding of terrorism. So now we have an opportunity here with the new administration that maybe this administration will use, its economic power, America's, and will restore America's standing or status in the world as a superpower, not only a military superpower, but also an economic superpower.
Yeah, hope isn't a power. Let me just basically say, hope is a powerful thing, because if you have hope for a better future, what will you do? You'll start to do the things that will be that self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have no hope, you're not going to do the things that it takes to get there. So I think that Trump brings hope back to the Middle East, and that is not just a slogan. I think that really makes a difference. Dan?
I think you're absolutely right. And it is actually hope and peace are a function of the mobilization of power. The United States, you said just a couple of minutes ago, is the greatest economic power in the world, and it is. And it was clear that America, together with Israel, back in 2017, 18, they began a process of bankrupting through their economic power and their ability to sanction the Iranian regime. And they basically bankrupted the Iranian regime. And there's nothing like bankrupting a regime to trigger what's called a regime change. And that is ultimately what has to happen here. The Middle East will remain a fragile, subverted, unstable, terror-ridden region that will continue to threaten the United States both directly and indirectly unless the Iranian regime is toppled. And there's nothing like financial leverage, exactly the way the United States did it during the first Trump administration, right, in order to bring peace and stability through the mobilization of financial power, of kinetic power, and also perception power. And this is the final point, Bill, that is missing in the U.S. dialogue. The Iranians, the Hezbollah, the Hamas, and the Russians have been using bots, avatars, deception warfare, just the way the Soviets did, the Chinese did, and the Iranians are doing in order to disrupt American society, in order to use perception warfare in order to create instability in America. And we know that both the Russians and the Iranians have interfered in U.S. elections. And this is very, very serious stuff that has to be exposed and confronted.
Yeah, remarkable. Well, let's talk a little bit about the U.S. election, because obviously this was a big deal for us. It just took place. And nobody expected Donald Trump to win every swing state. Nobody expected him to get 312 electoral votes, which is 6 more than he got in 2016. Nobody expected us to win the House and the Senate. I mean, right now, we control the White House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the majority of governorships. That is total and complete control. How do you guys feel about how Trump needs to leverage this? Because, what I always say is a mandate is a mile wide and an inch deep. You got a mandate as long as the other party fears the retribution of the voters if they oppose you. But unless you come out of the gate strong, you can lose that mandate very quickly. So what can Trump do in the first 100 days, in your opinion, to really solidify that mandate and set us up for the midterms?
Well, it's clear that the president has an unprecedented mandate in order to get things done. And clearly, we talked about how he could have a quick win in the Middle East if he gets the hostages back by mobilizing his leverage on the Hamas, on the Hezbollah. What people missed here is that they weren't listening. Certainly, the outgoing administration was not listening to the American people. The American people said, we are deeply concerned about our personal security in the United States through between 11 and 12 million illegal aliens penetrating the borders, including, by the way, Iranian-backed terrorists that have been filtering through the Texas border from Mexico. The Iranians work with Mexican drug lords, and they work with crime families throughout Latin America. And they have been sending, millions and millions of these operatives that have been, through the porous borders of Texas and the southern United States, And this is really what I think the president has got to get a quick win on this and stop this awful flow of illegals coming through the United States. Number two, he's got to bring down consumer prices, and he knows how to do that. He's got to bring down inflation ability. He's going to do that. Those are his two, I think, domestic priorities. And on the international scene, he probably will be able to engineer some sort of an interim grand bargain that will give him a sense of it will give him, the American people, a sense of success in the first 100 days.
Right, exactly. I think that Trump won because a lot of Democrats crossed over and voted for him. And these people are going to be on a short fuse. It's like, okay, we gave you a chance. We want to show that you're not just the uniparty. Show us that you're something different than what we had before. And then, of course, the Democrats are all planning for the midterms. That's all they're thinking about right now. How are we going to take back the House? How are we going to take back the Senate? So we really have an incredible opportunity, just like the contract with America with Newt Gingrich. And then the first 100 days, they got so much done. What are your thoughts about this, Khaled?
Well, I can speak as someone living in the Middle East and remind everyone that Trump brought peace between Israel and 4 Arab countries.
Yes.
The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and even Sudan, as Dan mentioned earlier. And very soon, I believe that Saudi Arabia will join the bandwagon, because the Saudis, they have very good relations with Trump. They admire him. And you know what, Bill? I can tell you many Arabs, they are fans of Trump. They like strong leaders.
Yeah.
They respect them.
The strong horse.
And I believe that, yes, and I believe that there is an opportunity over here that to expand the Abraham Accords in the Middle East, to bring more Arab countries, especially Saudi Arabia, to make peace with Israel, to normalize relations with Israel. But this requires, a will on the part of the Trump administration. We are hoping that he will place this at the top of his list of priorities, and we will see things moving in the Middle East. I'm not saying that the Palestinians are going to, wake up tomorrow morning and recognize Israel's right to exist. And I'm not saying that Hamas is going to disarm, but what I'm saying is there's an opportunity to create new alliances between Israel and several Arab countries, further isolating the Palestinians and the Iranian regime, and probably forcing them to change, their policies and their measures on the ground.
Yeah, I tell you what, I am absolutely filled with hope. I'm so excited because we endured a lot, for the last 4 years, and just to have things go so our way in this election, we're very excited, and we're very excited about bringing peace and prosperity to the world. I've always believed that America was the shining light on the hill, and that all the other countries and nations are like ships out at sea with stormy seas and 30-foot waves. And, as long as they can see that light on the hill in the distance, they say, okay, we can be okay. We can get back into port. But if that light fades, talk about, fascism, talk about communism, talk about all these things taking over the world, it would devolve very quickly. So I appreciate you gentlemen coming on the show today. Just a wealth of knowledge of what's going on there in the Middle East. Dan, how can people reach out to you and support your work?
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you for having Khaled and me on the show. You really put your finger on exactly what the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs is as a bridge between the Arab Muslim majority Middle East, Israel, and the West. And we believe, and we're working with Arab countries in the region that go beyond the Abraham Accords, that are not in the Abraham Accords yet, because they have faith in us. That we have very strong relationship with the United States. We've worked with Democratic and Republican administrations both. Here we have the results of dramatic results of the latest elections, and so obviously we'll be very happy to be working with the administration and others and lawmakers in Washington across both sides in the aisle. But I think the issue is one of liberty, freedom, and security. Those are the key words now that we have to work together for in order to achieve, as you said, peace and prosperity from the Middle East all the way to the West. And they're totally integrated today. And we can be found at jcpa.org. We're actually a 501c3. We're only supported by private resources and donations. And we're really dedicated to exactly what we've talked about on your program, which is a security, stability, peace, and prosperity for America, and that will echo across the world and reverberate across the Middle East. And this is what, as Khaled and I have talked about for so many decades, this is a moment the Middle East has been waiting for. They're actually waiting for the United States to lead a new world, or re-energize a world order, a rules-based order, an order of moral clarity, in which the United States, Israel, and now the Middle Eastern countries, the Arab countries, because of the work of the Trump administration, in the first administration, can all work together in the cause of peace and prosperity. And it's definitely possible. It just depends on the execution. And we at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs do everything we can in order to realize that vision.
That's exciting. Folks, if you want to follow Dr. Dan Diker, you can reach him on X at Dan_Diker. That's Diker. Khaled, are you also on X at all? Or?
Yes, it's a
What's
handle
your
and my name, which is KHALEDABUTOAMEH.
Okay, very good. I tell you what, this was great. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on. And we'll have to have you on again after Trump takes office, and we see if some of these things we hope are happening actually take place. Folks, this has been Bill Mitchell with Your Voice America. Thank you for tuning in to our live stream tonight. And we have had Dr. Dan Diker and Khaled Abu Toameh from the Jerusalem Center for Security and Affairs. And we've been talking about peace and